Mysterious restricted catacombs under Columbus, South Carolina, incredibly dangerous caves, meeting places for human sacrificing cults. These are 10 secret underground locations no one dares to enter. The Eagle's Nest in Florida, not a place you want to go for your first scuba dive. It's notorious for being one of the most dangerous scuba diving spots in the world. Now, from the surface, it looks like a small pond, a typical sinkhole you might see in your average park, and the dive starts off looking relatively straightforward, but as you descend, the challenges begin to pile up. The water gets darker the deeper you go, visibility drops off quickly. The cave system itself is this tangled mess of narrow, twisting passageways that can easily disorient even experienced divers. The cave system is incredibly deep, diving down more than 300 feet, and the water just turns pitch black. There's a huge risk of what's known as depth intoxication or narcosis, where the deep pressure affects your brain and judgment, making it harder to think clearly, which is a no-go for being deep underwater. On top of that, the cave passages are narrow and twisty, making navigation extremely difficult. At least 10 professional divers have died while exploring Eagle's Nest. In Buckinghamshire, England, there's a seemingly ordinary church and mausoleum. Surprise, surprise, it's not that ordinary. This site, surrounded by peaceful countryside, is actually the entrance to Hellfire Caves, a big network of tunnels and chambers carved out by hand. The caves were built by Sir Francis Dashwood in the 18th century. Dashwood was known for his wealth and some controversial activities. He had plenty of money and influence, and decided that he was going to expand on the existing network of caves beneath his property. His goal was to create a secret underground space that would serve as a dwelling for his infamous Hellfire Club and their secretive gatherings. The Hellfire Club members were rumored to engage in some pretty dark activities. Some of it was said to be a little scandalous, but the more extreme stories were that they practiced strange rituals, possibly even involving human sacrifice. One of the club's members, Paul Whitehead, was said to have burned all the records of the club's activities on his deathbed, so we'll never really know what went on down there. You can actually go on tours of these caves today, and not that you'd be allowed to, but you probably wouldn't want to spend the night there alone, given the rumors about its past. Unless you're like me, in which case you'd just jump at the opportunity. Beneath the streets of Columbia, South Carolina, are a series of catacombs, and no one is exactly sure what they were built for. What we do know is that they're completely off limits, but that doesn't stop urban explorers from sneaking their way in anyway. And what they're met with are a bunch of eerie, dark, dank tunnels. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Columbia was growing rapidly, and like many cities, it needed more space. This led to the construction of a network of passages and rooms beneath the city. They were originally supposedly built for practical reasons, mainly storage, but over time, rumors began to spread about what was actually going on down there. Some say the catacombs were used during Prohibition for bootlegging or other illegal activities like hiding stolen goods. Others think they might have been secret meeting places for political organizations. There are even urban legends about them being used for more sinister purposes. Access to these catacombs is highly restricted. The entrances are mostly sealed off or hidden, and while some parts of the catacombs have been documented, a lot of it is unexplored. The San José Mine. This site in the Atacama Desert became infamous in 2010 when a massive cave-in trapped 33 miners underground for over 2 months. They were trapped more than 2,300 feet underground, finding themselves in this cramped, dark space with no direct access to the surface. The heat down there must have been intense, and they had very limited ventilation. For the miners, every minute underground was a struggle for survival. The rescue operation was huge. It involved drilling through thick rock to reach the trapped miners. There were 3 separate drilling teams. Corporations from around the world aided in the rescue. Even NASA was involved. The rescue team used a specially designed capsule named the Phoenix to bring the miners up to the surface, but it took a while. The miners spent 69 grueling days underground before the first man was finally brought to the surface. But in the end, all 33 miners miners survived. Now, for some reason, there are tons of conspiracy theories surrounding the Denver International Airport. On the surface, it's just an airport, but there are said to be all sorts of little nods to the Illuminati throughout the place. And there are also the underground tunnels. There are some conspiracy theories about these tunnels not just being used for transporting luggage, but that they house secret bunkers for the world's elite. Others think the tunnels might even contain alien bodies. Now, why is it that there are all these crazy rumors about the Denver airport? Well, some people have pointed out that it has a bit of an unusual design. The airport has also a number of paintings and sculptures that a lot of people find unsettling or cryptic. There's a huge horse statue that's said to be a harbinger of doom. It's often referred to as a Lucifer by locals and folks online. The Cheddar Caves and Cheddar Gorge in England may not have the most ominous name, but there have been some pretty unsettling finds down there over the years. This gorge is the biggest in the country, about 400 feet deep, and it's been around for roughly 1 million years. It started forming back in the last ice age. Beneath the gorge, there's a huge network of caves where there have been some pretty cool archaeological finds. It seems like the Cheddar Caves were used by humans for around 40,000 years, so you can imagine how many crazy finds there are down there. The most famous find from these caves is the Cheddar Man, the oldest skeleton ever found in Britain. Discovered in 1903, Cheddar Man lived about 10,000 years ago. But there's some even more interesting stuff than that, and also a bit creepy. Scientists have found bones in the caves that are about 13,000 years old, with marks indicating that they were eaten, and not by wild animals. Yeah, as if prehistoric life wasn't horrific enough already, it looks like people were eating each other too, which is not that surprising, but it's still unsettling. The bones showed signs of having been scraped clean, which means the people they belonged to were likely consumed. The Presidential Emergency Operations Center, or PEOC, is allegedly located beneath the east wing of the White House in Washington, D.C. It was designed to provide a secure, fortified location for the president and other important politicians in case of an emergency. The PEOC was built deep underground, far below the White House, and is built to withstand all sorts of threats, including nuclear attacks. It's heavily fortified with thick walls and reinforced construction so that it can withstand the most extreme conditions, and it's got everything needed to carry out operations for an extended period of time. There are communication systems, supplies, and of course living quarters. It's designed to be the last line of defense in a situation where the world above has basically become hell on earth. Aside from the basic stuff I just outlined, we really don't know much else about what's down there, as most of the details are understandably classified, but the facility has been used before, most famously during the September 11th attacks, and there are actually photographs of George Bush meeting with members of the National Security Council down there. The Deep Underground Command Center. It's not 100% certain if this place even exists. It was proposed back in the 60s, but we don't know if it ever actually got built. The Deep Underground Command Center, often referred to as the Deep Underground Command and Control Site, or the DUCCS, was a US military project proposed back in 1962. The idea was to build a massive underground facility deep beneath the surface, between 3,000 to 4,000 feet down, designed to withstand a nuclear attack. The plan included two versions of the facility, a smaller one for 50 people and a larger one that could be expanded to accommodate around 300. The idea was to make sure that the facility could resist explosions from weapons as powerful as 200 to 300 megatons if detonated at the surface, or about 100 megatons if they penetrated deeper. It was pitched to President Kennedy pretty much right before he was killed. The project never moved past the planning stages. At least that's what's been said publicly. Did you know that the Pioneer Square neighborhood in Seattle was built over an old part of the city, which is still there? Back in the late 19th century, Seattle was still pretty young, but growing fast. The city was originally built at sea level, which meant that when it rained, it flooded a lot. This was especially a problem in the area known as Pioneer Square, which was the city's business district at the time. Now, despite all this flooding, it was actually a fire that that did this part of the city in. In 1889, a fire started in a glue shop, and the fire quickly turned into a massive blazing inferno that destroyed large chunks of the neighborhood. After the fire, city planners decided to elevate the streets. They raised the level of the sidewalks and the building's ground floors, but the old street level was still left underneath. So as a result, you had this underground city, which actually continued being used mostly for illegal activity. But eventually the streets fell into disuse and were closed off, mostly forgotten by the general public. Today though, parts of this underground city have been preserved, and you can take guided tours through the old tunnels and buildings. Pretty cool, getting to see the remnants of old storefronts and even some of the original cobblestone streets. But supposedly, as you can probably guess, these underground streets are said to be teeming with paranormal activity. Mount Shasta is a massive and beautiful peak in Northern California, and it's been the center of some pretty wild stories over the years, including one about a hidden underground city beneath it, according to legend anyway. Some versions of the story go that this city is home to some advanced and enlightened civilization, maybe extraterrestrials, or possibly remnants of an ancient lost civilization like Lemuria. Lemuria is sort of like Atlantis, a mythical continent that supposedly sank into the ocean. The idea is that the survivors of Lemuria took refuge in the tunnels under Mount Shasta. There's also been a lot of UFO sightings around this mountain, which only adds to the rumors that something strange is happening there. One of the most famous stories comes from a prospector named J.C. Brown. In 1904, while he was searching for gold, he claimed to have stumbled on a cave that led down about 11 miles. Inside, he said that he discovered an entire underground city filled with gold and other ancient artifacts as well, like shields, weapons, and even the remnants of giant mummified humanoids, some up to 10 feet tall. He didn't talk about the discovery until years later when he shared his story with a man named John C. Root. Root organized a search team to find this cave, but on the day they were supposed to meet up, Brown vanished. No one has ever seen or heard from him again. With all that said, I've been your host James, and I'll catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.